This report is absolutely jaw-dropping as multiple new reports have come out surrounding Mitch Marner's future in Toronto. But one new report surrounding Sam Bennett and the Toronto Maple Leafs not only has fans fired up, but it is absolutely ridiculous. So to break down exactly what that is and discuss what it means going forward, as well as a few other updates here today. But before we get into it, folks, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. Your guys' support has been unbelievable, and thank you for bearing with me while I was gone away. Both Darius and myself are back now to our normal setups, and it'll be like that for the foreseeable future. So thank you guys for bearing with that, Darius. A lot to go over today, and things are starting to pick up. They're starting to pick up fast, and of course, the Stanley Cup Finals are upon us. And unfortunately, the Leafs aren't in it. But we have a bunch of new reports to go over. And obviously, Mitch Marner's future in Toronto seems to be pretty made up according to a lot of reports here at this point. But a new report has dropped. Some rumors have dropped. But let's start with this one right here. And it is very interesting. And it is from Shannon, and we've been covering him, a lot here on the channel because he's had a lot to say about the Mitch Marner situation. And we also have an interesting report and rumor from, and we'll get to in a few minutes here. But there are people within the Florida Panthers organization that are concerned that Sam might have already made up his mind that something might happen with the Leafs, and they're hoping that they can still convince him to play in Sunrise. So this one is very, very wild. You pair this with Chris Johnson coming out and saying that they're hoping to work on a sign and trade here. There's a bunch of rumors going around, but Darius, according to John Shannon here, he's hearing that maybe Sam Bennett has already made up his mind regarding coming to Toronto, his hometown, of course, which is a little bit crazy considering, Mitch Marner is still an option here for the Leafs.
Yeah, I just want to say too, off the bat, that a lot of what we're going to talk about as it pertains to coming from Darren Dreger might be coming from the Mitch Marner camp directly, and John Shannon's come out of nowhere with this. So keep that in mind. Like, some of this stuff could be from the team, some of this stuff
Take
could
it with
be
a grain of
from
salt.
from Darren Ferris. Take it with a grain of salt. Now, Darren Ferris, speaking of which, is also Sam Bennett's agent. Him and Mitch Marner share the same agent. So I think this is very interesting. And the fact that John Shannon came out and used the wording that the Florida Panthers are trying to convince Sam Bennett to stay, I think that's insane that came pretty much out of nowhere, and that he's made up his mind and wants to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I feel like that's come out of nowhere completely. I still think the most likely outcome is that he stays in Florida, but anything can happen. And now something else that's come to light is, we've been talking about a Mitch Marner sign and trade. And we're going to have another video about that as well, because that is becoming a reality. They're trying to work on that. I don't think Mitch Marner is returning to the Leafs, but I think the Leafs are trying to work with his camp on a sign and trade so they can get some type of asset back in return for Mitch Marner. And a lot of people are like, why would a team do that if you can just sign him for free, essentially in free agency without giving up anything? You get the extra year on the contract. You get that 8th year. And Mitch Marner and his camp have come out and said, we don't care about it, but I think that you do actually care about it, because if you sign for, let's say, 12 and a half or 13 million a year, that's an extra 12 and a half to 13 million for that extra year, right? So that's a lot of money. So I do think that they, somewhat care about it, but I don't think they want to help the Leafs out in any way. But, there has been some things floated out there about maybe a sign and trade for both of them because they share the same agent, which I think is absolutely insane at this point. But there's a lot of moving pieces right now. And the fact that John Shannon's come out of seemingly nowhere and said that Sam Bennett wants to play in Toronto. He's only going to play in 2 places, is what he said the other day. And it's either Toronto or Florida. And now Florida's having a hard time convincing him to stay. I feel like it's Darren Ferris playing hardball with the Florida Panthers as well. So there's just a lot going on right now.
And let's also not forget, Sam Bennett is currently playing for the Florida Panthers, trying
Yeah.
to win a Stanley Cup. But these things do happen behind the scenes. And I do believe the Toronto or Florida kind of thing for Sam Bennett, because either there's not going to be a much better team for Florida if he doesn't want to come home. But of course, Toronto has the advantage in the sense of, he's Canadian, Sam Bennett, that is. So he would obviously, in theory, if he's leaving Florida for whatever reason, whether it's Florida doesn't want to pay him, Florida, all these different things, it's going to be interesting to see. And then again, Chris Johnson says the Leafs are hoping to work with Marner's camp on a sign and trade, but right now it doesn't look likely. This is a pretty big deal, as well as, all signs at this point point to Mitch Marner being out of Toronto, and that's obviously, clarified here by Chris Johnson, who is very reputable and reliable. And then you have Steve Dangle kind of adding some fuel to the fire here surrounding the Sam Bennett conversation. Text I just got: could Darren Ferris engineer June 28th Marner for Bennett dual sign and trade that results in Bennett getting an 8x8 in Toronto and Marner getting an 8x12 in Florida? My phone then melts and evil spirits flood from it. Not sure what that means. So this is, of course, a rumor. Take it, again, with a massive grain of salt here. This is not, this particular, screenshot and thing from Steve Dangle. It's not a report necessarily. However, it does start to have fans wondering, Darius, it could make some sense. Now, will it be as direct as this? I doubt. But some world where Marner, and it doesn't have to be Florida, but Marner leaves, and then of course Sam Bennett comes to Toronto is a very likely, I think, outcome at this point if Marner leaves. Likely meaning I don't think it's, above a 50% chance that the Leafs get Sam Bennett, but if Marner leaves, I think a very likely outcome would be they pursue Sam Bennett here. But this one had fans fired up, and you look at his stats. Again, they're not going to blow you away or anything, but for $6 million less a year than Mitch Marner, plus the playoff production, it gives you some more avenues now to explore different things. And I don't like him as the way he plays, but I can't help but admit that it would help the Toronto Maple Leafs. Not the dirty parts, but the playoff production and the grit that the Leafs seem to not have, and that Brad Treliving was alluding to when he's talking about lack of DNA.
Yeah, showing up in the big moments. This guy leads the league in scoring in the playoffs right now. Like he is the only player to be in double digit scoring. So he could really help the Toronto Maple Leafs in that way. Like the dirty stuff, like you talked about, we can talk about that as well. I don't think he's going to get away with some of that stuff in Toronto, but like you can see here, leading the league in scoring. So pretty impressive stuff for Sam Bennett. Obviously showing up in the big moments. He scored a big goal from Mitch Marner in the Four Nations face-off as well to tie that game in the final. So I think the Toronto Maple Leafs would like Sam Bennett. Again, I think a lot of this is Darren Ferris just floating this stuff out to different insiders and reporters and stuff like that. So take all of it with a grain of salt right now, because a lot of this is negotiation tactics. But I think that he would like to, I think he would be open to playing in Toronto. And I think that only two places for sure. It would be Toronto or Florida at this point. And I don't think it's too far-fetched to think maybe not a sign and trade, but something where they are swapped, where Marner does end up going to Florida. That's what we've heard the last couple of days, and maybe Bennett to Toronto. But 8 million is as high as I would go for Sam Bennett, I think, in terms of being comfortable with that, because he's not a $12 million player, a $10 million player. He's not. But he is going to score you maybe 65 points in a season if he stays healthy and he plays the whole year. And he's going to score you big goals in the playoffs and just be in the mix all the time, right? And he might not get away with as much in Toronto. We've talked about that. OEL hasn't either. A lot of these guys that came from Florida are not getting away with as much. But he's still an effective player. He's not a Mitch Marner. This is not about replacing Mitch Marner, but I think it's an interesting idea, and I feel like the Leafs would probably want him. But again, most likely outcome, in my personal opinion, he's probably staying with the Florida Panthers, and a lot of this is being floated out there by Darren Ferris because it's the same agent for both players.
Yeah, but a Sam Bennett for Mitch Marner swap is a little bit mind-blowing to me, and it made my jaw drop a little bit just thinking about that, because it makes sense for both sides. If Florida wins the Cup, you would assume they're willing to pay Sam Bennett to return, but the way Florida is, you never really know, especially with the cap and all these different things. I also think Marner would fit pretty well in Florida, and the Florida Panthers points this postseason, Sam Bennett only trails Sasha Barkov, so obviously, Barkov is their best player, so it makes sense there. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, and it also is interesting now seeing how the rest of the Stanley Cup Finals play out and where the Leafs fell against the Panthers, who inevitably are Cup favorites at this point. Maybe it leads to less change, or maybe it leads to even bigger change because you need to make a bunch of adjustments here. So let us know down below what your thoughts are. Some other things coming out. I know Sam Bennett is controversial with all the hits and nonsense, but isn't that the Panthers' identity, playing on the edge? And we both spoke pretty negatively regarding Sam Bennett, the way that he conducted himself with Anthony Stolarz and things like that. But as a player, fantastic hockey player, and he would help this Leafs team. So let us know down below. Do you want to get Sam Bennett if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, or do you think you should stay away from that? Because he made contact Frederik Andersen's head there a couple games ago. But let us know down below what your thoughts are, and we're going to keep you up to date with all the latest news. Tons of news is coming out. This is the place to be. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Live streams coming soon as well. So see you guys later.